Good morning. Welcome into Five Clubs here on Golf Channel. Great to have you with us live on a Tuesday morning. You can also listen. That is PGA Tour Radio. That is Channel 92 on Sirius XM. I am Gary Williams. This program is always brought to you by Century Insurance. Business insurance needs are always met by Century. They are right by you, and they make right decisions when it comes to the game of golf. They're partnered with the USGA and the First Tee. Golf Pride. When it comes to grips and having choices, and I mean through the bag, every single choice you need to make, they have more, they have better materials. That's why they are trusted by more players at every level in the game of golf globally. Peter Millar, if you want this crown-crafted quarter zip that I'm wearing, you can have it. Go right now to petermillar.com. All the fall line is available to you. Now, if you want it logoed with this Pinehurst logo, well, you'll have to book a trip and go to the pro shop at one of the many pro shops there at the cradle of American golf, including Pinehurst number 10, voted the best new public golf course in America last year. The new clubhouse is open. Pinehurst number 8 has the new cottages. They have new restaurants that they opened at the clubhouse at number 10. Another new one coming at the main resort as well. They are always under construction to make your next experience better and more full than the last one. All right, a lot to get to on a Tuesday. Dave Rumsey of Front Office Sports is going to join me. He covers the business of sports, specifically golf. And we're at a time where you're thinking, what is going to be the first big move that we hear as it relates to the impact that Brian Rolap, the new CEO of the PGA Tour, presumptive big boss, eventually he is now for all intents and purposes. And I actually think some news that we got yesterday is a reflection of that, whether that was well in the works or not, regarding sponsorship and a long-term sponsor. But we'll talk about other items as well, including the USGA and Versant, which is part of the spin-off that includes Golf Channel, the rebranding of that, in conjunction with USA Network and their new media rights deal, an extension with the USGA, and some other items with him, and Shane Ryan from Golf Digest, and an author of a couple of excellent books, including one on the Ryder Cup. He's immersed himself in the entire Ryder Cup culture when he was penning that book that it was around the 2021 Ryder Cup, the cup they couldn't lose. I think this year could be a sequel. We'll talk to him about his latest on the construct of that U.S. team, maybe a little bit on Europe as well. And this interesting situation with Keegan Bradley as it relates to him picking himself and why he may be the only guy who would be the captain who may not pick himself, which is weird irony considering he was the guy that most people thought, if you want to use the term snub, I'm not a big fan of it. Nonetheless, Shane Ryan coming up in less than 15 minutes. Couple things just quickly to start the program. I saw this about 5 minutes before we came on the air this morning, that Billy Horschel has taken primarily to Instagram. I didn't look on Twitter X, probably there as well, that he has himself announced that he's going to return to competition at an event that he will be in defense of a title. He's won the BMW PGA Championship at Wentworth twice. Well, he's coming back. What an appropriate place for him to return after going through surgery and the rehab. We had him on here recently, about a month ago. So Billy, about 5 minutes ago, announcing that he will return to competition at Wentworth in the month of September. Great to hear, great to see. The other thing I just want to mention, it may not be related to golf, but as somebody who loves sports television, it was nostalgic, it was neat. I thought it was poignant last night that Rich Eisen, now that the NFL Network is ostensibly owned by ESPN, that he returned to that desk in the LA studios and actually hosted SportsCenter. Listen, I grew up loving all sports on television, including studio shows like the NFL Today, and Brett Musburger was honored by the Pro Football Hall of Fame a couple of weeks ago, as he should have been years ago. But Rich Eisen last night, and the honor that he did by paying homage to his late partner on SportsCenter, Stuart Scott, beautifully done, well done. Maybe you get him periodically in that role to do something he did expertly for so many years. All right, let's transition to where we are, because it is the Tour Championship. And there are a couple things that I want to touch on as it relates to not only this event, but this series as a whole. And what I will say is that for all of the things said and written over the last couple of weeks about things that still should change, and here we sit. Look, that's okay. I'm listening to the commissioner of Major League Baseball talking about the Phillies, Mets, Red Sox, and Yankees sharing a division. Change is always part of the construction of whether it be leagues or whether it be conferences or whether it be playoff formats or how many teams are getting in. That's not new. It's something that we're challenged to adapt to. But here's what I would say about where we sit in these playoffs as they are. There's been a lot of change. There's been a lot that I think is worthwhile. The thing that must be remembered about this is that this was primarily created because you had one guy who was pulling the sled in such a way that he was creating a wake outside of the game of golf. And that, of course, was Tiger. He was such a significant figure, not just in golf, not just in sports, but culturally, that this series, the PGA Tour looked around and go, why don't we do something where maybe we get more of him after the final major of the year, which used to be the PGA in the month of August. And so they created this series in September, and they're butting up against pro football, and yet they're still carving out a pretty reasonable audience, all things considered, because of him primarily, and secondarily, but still importantly, was his foil, Phil Mickelson. So let's not lose sight of the fact that the impetus and the driving force of these FedEx Cup playoffs was Tiger, understandably, smartly. And it is something that has produced a ton of money, not only for the players who play in these events, but the sponsorship has been very valuable to the PGA Tour. So that's good. That's been a win. But along the way, it's, well, these aren't really playoffs, and how are you doing this? And he's not really the winner, and he should be the winner, and why are you having 2 trophies? And that seems weird, and that seems uncomfortable. And why don't we have a staggered start? And now we don't again. I have my own ideas on some things that I think might be worth examining. I'm going to wait until next week. We have what we have. So we're going to sit here, we're going to digest it, and we're going to see what transpires this week. But it doesn't mean that there are not other aspects in the grander sense of what might be worth examining. And this is another thing that a lot of people have kicked around. And this gets to a couple of hypersensitive things, because I never take for granted the value of the markets that have made the choice to host some of these events. And 2 of them are anchored where they are. And I understand the reasons why. FedEx, which has been consistently the title sponsor of this series, as they have infused tens and tens of millions of dollars into the sport of men's professional golf by virtue of the PGA Tour. And why wouldn't they have it in their home? And here's the other part that I'm not only sensitive to, but I have great admiration and get inspiration from, because I've been to that hospital, and that is St. Jude. And I'm not saying you turn your back on that market, but I think that it could be best served. And I'm not just talking about this series, but I'm focusing on that right now in this moment, that if you add markets and venues and create mini rotas for this series, it makes the return to those markets every 3 or 4 years, I think, more energetic. And it's like, wow, the last time it was here, it was 4 years ago, or it was 3 years ago. And it doesn't mean turning your back on Eastlake, because Eastlake is more than just a venue for professional golf. Eastlake has been a platform and an agent for change in the lives of thousands of children, literally thousands of children. And we will get to that in just a moment. But here is just a list of places. This is me. These are just a small sampling, and it's not in any particular order. I'm not putting the International Golf Club that has been reimagined and redone, the Pines course there outside of Boston by Core Crenshaw. There you're adding and returning to a market that's been very valuable to the PGA Tour. The Northeast Corridor, for the most part, has been abandoned with respect to these playoffs. They'll go back to Liberty National a couple of years. The Honors Course, not far. And oh, by the way, Jack Lupton, who is the visionary of the Honors Course, also has a connection, and a strong one, to Coca-Cola, which is a big part of the Tour Championship. Westchester Country Club, nostalgic. Again, the New York market. Congaree Golf Club. And here's the thing about Congaree. They just had the Arnold Palmer Cup. We were there for that and did the show there. They also, in very short order, have shown the ability, because they are big thinkers with big ideas, and there's nothing they don't think that they can't do. They have held 2 PGA Tour events, and they did it literally in the blink of an eye. Medina will host the President's Cup next year on course number 3. Again, totally reimagined by Jeff Ogilvy and Mike Cocking and Robin Mead and their design firm. It's a totally, basically new golf course. Castle Pines proved that it is worthy of hosting a playoff event. They nailed it last year. Chambers Bay, you get back into the Pacific Northwest, you get primetime hours. And there's Monterey Peninsula Country Club, which has been diminished to a modest degree because of the construct now of what the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am is. You don't get that road of the way you once did. The fields are smaller. It's a signature series event. That is just a small sampling of venues that you could go to, whether it be the BMW, whether it be the FedEx Cup, or whether it be the Tour Championship, because I think that all of these events, if you create mini rotas, and I will not stop there, I think that some PGA Tour events should look at one-offs, because you might be able to get a membership to digest the idea of doing a PGA Tour event once every 5 years, because as much as people think market matters most, generally, I don't think that's true. But if you can thread the needle where you match market with venue, now you're cooking with gas. And that's attainable, because when I say market, I'm not just talking about specifically about University Place, Washington, which is a little bedroom community and it's not next door to Seattle, but I'm talking about the idea of going to the Pacific Northwest and going to a place that gives you an opportunity to open up a TV window that currently doesn't exist on a Saturday and a Sunday night in the month of August at 8 o'clock at night, and pull the curtain on sports. And that gets me back to Eastlake. Now, this week is important for a lot of reasons, and it has been important primarily because of one man, and that one man is no longer with us, because on July 29, Tom Cousin, at the age of 93, passed away. And I was very fortunate in my life to have some interludes with Mr. Cousins. And Mr. Cousins represents something that I'm not saying has been altogether lost, but it's been compromised. And I'm talking about civility and decency and empathy and selflessness, in a way that these platforms that we are too reliant upon, that allow passive-aggressive behavior, where it's much easier to either take a shot or try to score points, as opposed to simply paying a compliment. Tom Cousins will be missed this week, but what will not be missed, not only this week, but going forward, is the impact that he has had, because he, as I said, represents something that people who really care about golf feel inherently a responsibility to not just take something from the game, the joy, the fellowship, the competitiveness that we might get at modest levels, but the idea that I too can give something. And the Drew Charter School and what that has done, and the mixed income housing developments around Eastlake Golf Club, and the revitalization of a neighborhood that was altogether lost 25 years ago. I think that Eastlake should always be a part of the Tour Championship, always. And I hope that all those people who had a relationship with Tom Cousins celebrate him, as I know that they will this week. It'll start tonight with the Payne Stewart Award. And anytime you walk into that clubhouse, you feel not only a sense of history, but a sense of purpose, not only because it was the childhood home of Bobby Jones, but because of what Tom Cousins chose to do by making that the epicenter for not just a place where golf is played, but an idea and a vision that golf can be an agent for change in a very powerful and profound way. They will honor him this week because he deserves it. Wouldn't want it necessarily, but that's what happens when you literally change the trajectory of thousands of young people's lives that would have been otherwise cast aside to varying degrees. All right, we're going to take a break here. When we continue, Shane Ryan, one of the best writers, great thinkers, that now is focused on the game of golf and has been for some years now. And he is into the Ryder Cup in a way that I admire and appreciate. We'll get his thoughts on where we sit because it is interesting to say the least. In the Keegan quandary, wow, could he pass on himself simply because he feels like he needs to, or does he need to choose himself because he feels an obligation because he is one of the 12 best? Never thought we would be here, but we are. He joins me next. We are live, of course, on Golf Channel and also SiriusXM's Channel 92 on PGA Tour Radio. Back with Shane Ryan of Golf Digest right after this. Welcome back in this Tuesday edition of 5 Clubs Golf Channel and also SiriusXM's Channel 92 on PGA Tour Radio. This segment brought to you by Peter Millar. This Crown Crafted quarter zip can be yours. Just go to petermillar.com. We transition hopefully sooner than later. I know the guy joining me now is looking forward to some cooler conditions up the road in Durham, North Carolina. Again, Peter Millar, whatever it is that you need on the course off, they've got you covered. Joining me now from Golf Digest, also the author of 2 tremendous books. I thought it was kind of a game changer when he wrote Slaying the Tiger. And at the time, he was writing about a lot of stuff. Now he's narrowed his focus and he wrote The Cup They Couldn't Lose. I think he needs to write the sequel this year. It'd be The Cup They Couldn't Lose, duh, or duh, no matter how you want to write it. He, of course, Shane Ryan, he joins me now from his home. He had the crud, got it on a Friday. He bounced back. Good to see you. How you feeling?
I'm feeling great, Gary. And I have to say, before we came on air, usually the pre-interview chatter is like about what you're going to talk about, but I want everybody watching to know that the very last thing before they cut our mics, we were talking about being sick. It went from there, and Gary's words were, "Tragedy is the human condition," which, and then the mics are cut off. It's the absolute deepest thing I've ever heard just before going on a segment to talk about professional golf.
Yeah, now we get to the frivolity of this subject. All right, I so love how immersed you are into the Ryder Cup. And I know it wasn't that you were not already curious before you started the project that became the book you wrote about Whistling Straits. But in the aftermath, now you're just, I mean, you wallow in it, you bask in it. It's fantastic. And for everybody to go and read your latest stuff, it's great when you look about, you know, all the locks, who's in, who's out, and all that. But I want to start with Keegan because you wrote something that I think is so spot on about he finds himself in this weirdly ironic position that he would be the only guy, truly, who would pass on Keegan Bradley, the player. Please explain that in total.
Yeah, and so for context, I'm sure most of your viewers understand that he hasn't played in a Ryder Cup since 2014. It's a passion of his. It's been one of these things where I feel kind of cursed, like he can't make the team. He still has the unpacked bag from the last time he went to the Ryder Cup. But so in Rome, he was really a candidate for the 12th man and was left off the team by Zach Johnson. I thought that was justified at the time, actually. I thought Justin Thomas was a better pick. He's had a great Ryder Cup career. But then Full Swing came out, and they had been following Keegan and profiling the whole thing and profiling Zach Johnson. And it was this very sympathetic, sad portrayal of Keegan, which engendered a ton of sympathy. People are going, oh, it's not fair that look what a great guy he is. He was left off the team unfairly. Zach Johnson did a bad job. There was such an overwhelming swell of sympathy that it went so far that they made him the captain, right? Which is one of the crazier captaincy decisions in Ryder Cup memory. Not because he can't be a good captain, but because it was completely out of left field, and he still had a chance to be a player on the team. And it set up a situation where, wow, what if he has to pick himself as a captain's pick? You know, and when we talked about this a year and a half ago, lo and behold, here we are. And to your point, Gary, this is something that occurred to me during my fever state. I had this thought of, think of all that sympathy he had coming off of Rome. Let's say he wasn't the captain, wins the Travelers just like he did in the Rome cycle. He's played fine. He's, a top 13 world player. He's in the top 12 of the standings. There is not one captain who would, screw job him for the second time, who would keep him off that team just like Zach Johnson did. It simply wouldn't be done. There's no captain on earth. The only guy who could leave Keegan Bradley off the team is Keegan Bradley himself, because then you're fighting the whole perception thing. Oh, you picked yourself. Matt McNeely was higher than you in the standings, but you still picked yourself. Now you've got a lot of pressure on you to go out and win Friday. Now whoever's playing with you has a ton of pressure on them. Maybe the entire team has pressure on them. It creates a distraction because we know how that media goes in the week leading up, and it just brings this unwanted kind of element in. And so I just thought there was like this universal irony in that the curse continues, because the only way to keep Keegan Bradley off the team as a player would have been to make him captain a year and a half ago, which is exactly what happened. It's like Old Testament biblical curse, or like the old Chinese curse, may you get what you want. And it just kind of blew my mind when I thought of it, of how cosmically unfair that is.
Yes. No, there's nobody, whether it's Tiger, just make the list. It doesn't matter. Like you said, where he is, he's won a golf tournament this year, which, again, he wouldn't have been the captain, but because he was and he won, he kind of gets extra credit because he's dealing with all this ancillary noise and responsibility. Does it matter to you at all that he himself has moved the goalpost on him as a player candidate? Because he said at the outset, if I am an automatic qualifier, then I would have to make a choice. Like, I'm not going to pick myself. And now it's like, well, I still might pick him. Does that matter to you?
You know, it's just a lesson in don't say things you don't have to say that could come back to bite you. So it doesn't really bother me. I mean, I think if he's a legitimate captain's pick, why shouldn't he be a captain's pick, right? So, but the perception, it certainly doesn't help him that he said that in the past. Where it's like, well, you said if you weren't a top 6 pick, you weren't going to do it. Then after the Travelers, you said, well, now things have changed. And you get this addendum agreement going with Luke Donald, where it really seems like you're going to pick yourself because you're making contingency plans of who's going to be captain when you're playing. But then guess what happens? Murphy's Law, you don't play that well coming down the stretch. So now you're this really marginal, probably still deserves to make the team, but it's a lot more questionable now. And it's like, yeah, I mean, it doesn't bother me, but it would have been a lot better for him. And again, don't say it. If you don't mean it, don't say it in the beginning. It's a life lesson we could all take to heart, I think.
Okay, so if he does pick himself, do you think that we will have some noticeable, like, invoking of the Ryder Cup 25th Amendment by the vice captains, that they will kind of, with the exception maybe of him doing the opening remarks and the opening speech, and then it'll be clear that he has recused himself? Do you think that, like, if he does play, do you think that he will be truly a player with some responsibilities on the front end, but after that, he's just a player?
You know, it's so hard to say. I hope they have a plan, because I agree with Rory that when you look at the responsibilities of that week and everything going into it, and then you throw in the pressure, like we said, of, oh, you better win your first match because you picked yourself, otherwise you're going to get fried. I mean, it just seems like way too much. It doesn't seem like a good idea at all. It didn't seem like a good idea at the time. It's such a cluster, Gary. I don't know how it's going to work, but I hope and pray that they have it ironed out, because if they don't have every logistic covered, it is going to be a complete headache.
Let's get to these various players. We know the 6 who are on it. Let's get to guys who you think are kind of lead pipe locks to be on the team. And this was as of yesterday. You have Ben Griffin, you have Colin Morikawa, you have Justin Thomas as essentially mortal locks to be on the side. Let me start with Morikawa. Why? Is it because he is going to be on the team, or you think he absolutely should be on the team?
Well, I don't know anything. I don't know anything to, so don't, interpret this as me citing sources that I don't have. But no, I think Colin Morikawa is just, for me in Memphis, when he finished top 10, that was enough to kind of secure his spot, because his pedigree, really, Gary. I think the fact that he's won majors, the fact that he's played and done really well in Ryder Cups, I think you just have to have a guy with that kind of experience on the team. There is a sense that things are not going great for him right now. Like, he keeps fighting with the media. He keeps changing caddies. He's not at his best. So you could take a radical approach and say, you know what, I'm not gonna put him on the team. Actually, he's not that great a course for that Bethpage either. But in the de facto world and the realpolitik world we live in, you're just not ever going to keep Colin Morikawa off the team. And so I kind of put him on there as I don't know if he deserves it. I don't know if he should be on the team, but I think he's definitely going to, and it's 100% in my mind.
Okay, he has one top 10 in his last 13 starts. He's changing caddies,
True.
it seems like, on a weekly basis. And this is just, again, why somebody should be on the team. And again, I've said this repeatedly, this is not an all-star game. You're trying to construct a team in terms of a format that is very different from what these guys are kind of accruing all of this performance quantitative data based on. So if you have them on, okay, you have them on. But if we're using criteria for these other players in a certain way, and yet we're diminishing things that he has not done, like he has not played well, seriously, for months. And you mentioned him as a match for the golf course. He's 140th in putting, which is something that the United States seems to be deficient in every time this competition is played. I'm just kind of confused as to why he's the mortal lock. And oh, by the way, he was 1-3 in the last Ryder Cup. And it's not entirely on him. It's a team competition. He did get dusted in his singles match as well. To me, him being this lock, to me, I'm kind of, it's a head scratcher to me.
No, you're making really great points, Gary, and I think you've convinced me. And this is also, to add to that, this is why you reduce the captain's picks to 6, right? Because there may be a guy in 8th or 9th that you don't want on the team, and you want to give yourself the freedom to pick the best course fits. I just don't know if diplomatically we're there yet. As in, I don't know if you can leave a 2-time major winner with Ryder Cup experience who just finished top 10 in a playoff event. I don't know if diplomatically you can leave that guy off the team if you're Keegan Bradley. But to your point, that is not about playing well. It's not about who's going to be the best at Bethpage. It's political considerations and it's perception considerations. So the truly bold pick might be, as you said, to leave Colin Morikawa off the team. I just don't think we're in that world where that's going to happen. I could be wrong, but I think, spiritually, you're correct. I think politically, I'm correct.
And again, this is looking at the player. It's not, none of this is personal, but in the end, I agree with you in terms of the breaking away from like this institutional kind of mindset of the profile of said player, whoever that player might be. Let me ask you about the Chris Goddard thing, because you wrote about him and you said, the moment's over. He had his moment and now the moment's over. But you said even if he wins the Tour Championship, you don't think he's going to be on the team. Seriously? This guy plays with Rory on a Sunday in Scotland. Come on, Rory, a zillion times, outplays him, goes to the Open, finishes 3rd, goes to the 3M on fumes, finishes in the top 10. He's gassed. He's doing media left, right, and center, has 2 blasé weeks, wins the Tour Championship, and you're going to keep him off the team?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't think he's going to win the Tour Championship. I think the playoff events have shown it, but it is intriguing. I believe I also said that I can't quite rule him out if he does win the Tour Championship.
Okay.
So I have hedged my bets there. But no, I mean, Chris Goddard is such an interesting case because a hot hand statistically, when you study it, actually doesn't mean as much as you'd think in the Ryder Cup. So in other words, if you were, you had a tremendous August and then you take a month off and you go to the Ryder Cup because you're on the team, it doesn't mean you're going to play that well. Historically, it hasn't. So Goddard was the hottest hand going other than Scheffler on the American side when he played in Scotland and when he finished 3rd at the Open. He also happens to be a tremendous course fit for Bethpage. When you look at the data golf, measuring, what he does well, driving the ball well, he would be really, really good for that course. And so after the Open, after he finished 3rd, you go, this guy, you got to seriously look at this guy. However, you do still have to earn your way on the team. And he did nothing before that, that link swing.
Fair.
Where he wasn't even in consideration. So he's very much a Johnny-come-lately.
Yep.
I thought if he consolidated what he did overseas with really good playoffs, then I think you pick him. I mean, I think you pick him because he's great for the course. He's kind of a hometown guy. Not that matters that much, but he's from Jersey. But really, he's just a really hot hand who plays well for that course. However, cooling off that much, now what are you taking him on? A couple events in July and not much else? I think it gets really, really hard to justify that, and he's not even coming in hot. Now, again, if you won the Tour Championship, maybe a different conversation happens, but it just seems like whatever that little peak he found, I think he's fallen off of it. So I don't expect that to happen.
All right, last thing on the European part of this. I think it's delicious that this team, it appears, is going to be the exact same team that dusted the Americans in Rome. Almost like the Blues Brothers rolling out to Long Island wearing sunglasses and smoking cigarettes, getting the band back together. I think it's perfect. What is your position on the fact that Rory laid down the marker in Rome saying we're going there and we're going to win, and they're literally taking the same captain and the same team, substituting Erasmus for a Nikolai for all intents and purposes, it looks like. Do you love that? I love it.
Yeah, I love it. And the reason I specifically love it is because the next big Ryder Cup result will be an away team winning. We've now had 5 straight home blowouts, not just home wins, but home blowouts. But what keeps happening is, and you don't know if this is a retroactive thought, but what keeps happening is that the away captains really aren't seeming to have done a good job. And you have guys like, Padraig Harrington, the last time was at Whistling Straits, where he kind of got away a little bit from the European template. He wasn't as well prepared as past European captains. Well, now we have a situation where we're going to put it to the test, where you've got a great captain who knows what he's doing. You've got a team full of experience, almost to a comical degree, like you said, where they're almost literally bringing the same full squad in. They're substituting a twin brother for the 12th man. Otherwise, it's the same. The genetics are exactly the same as the Rome team. So you have this test case where we're going to see the very best that a visiting team has to offer. And the Americans, on the other hand, seem to be, making some interesting choices that could lead to chaos and who knows what. So we're going to see if this works, or if home field advantage, home course advantage is too great an obstacle to be overcome in the modern Ryder Cup. So I think it's very, very exciting. We needed something like this. We needed the lab experiment played out of Europe at its absolute peak, bringing in the best guys, the best captain, see what happens at Bethpage.
Your time is valued always. I greatly appreciate it. Glad you're feeling better. Glad we had that very deep moment before we were actually on the air. We will do this again soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gary.
All right, Shane Ryan, Golf Digest, a terrific author. The book might be a couple years old, but read The Cup They Couldn't Lose, because it explains all the inner workings of what this whole giant machine is. All right, we take a quick break, come back. The business of golf. There's some big news that has come down very recently, including yesterday. We'll dive into that next here on 5 Club's Golf Channel and also PGA Tour Radio, Channel 92, Sirius XM. Back after this. Back in this Tuesday edition of 5 Clubs here, Golf Channel, also Sirius XM's Channel 92. That's PGA Tour Radio. In this segment brought to you by Pinehurst. When it comes to booking a trip, to know that you have options with golf, options on food, options on accommodations. There's no place in America that can offer you more than the Pinehurst Resort. They are the cradle of American golf. We're going to talk about the business of golf right now with Dave Rumsey of Front Office Sports, because we want people to feel like, you know what, whatever is happening in the industry, we have people who are plugged in, and that is what Dave does. Good morning, my friend from Charleston, one of my favorite places. How are you?
I'm doing great, Gary. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm doing super. Thank you for taking the time. We had arranged to do this some time ago, but good timing, because some good news for the PGA Tour yesterday on sponsor extensions from a core sponsor that has invested a lot in the PGA Tour with multiple sponsorships. That is RBC. Dave, give everybody a sense of what this means for the two events, one in the Carolinas and obviously that event in Canada.
Yeah, so in the announcement that came out yesterday, multi-year extensions for the RBC Heritage, which is played annually right after the Masters down in Hilton Head, and then the RBC Canadian Open. And the big news is that, at least for next year, the RBC Heritage is going to stay a signature event on the PGA Tour, the $20 million purse, the limited but elevated field. And there were some questions about that, but that signature event is going to stay right after the Masters. It's kind of gained some traction in recent years. I know not everybody loves putting those signature events either before or after a major, but that's kind of the model that the PGA Tour is going after. And obviously a huge financial commitment from RBC to be funding 2 tournaments, one of them being a signature event.
Dave, we were saying this, and we've been saying this since Truist did their deal, that they were the first to dive in big time when it comes to multi-year at that signature series level. And now you have RBC with their 2 events. That's good news. That's a good sign. Do we have any indication whether it be AT&T, Travelers, Genesis, these others, even Workday for that matter with the Memorial, about where they are? Because I know several of them have been going year to year.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And a lot of these things do kind of take place in the shadows, and it's not really out there for everyone to know, but I kind of like to separate them into several different categories. So you have the kind of the big 3, right? You know, Tiger, Jack, and Arnie's tournaments. And Genesis is, yes, it's going year to year on its sponsorship, but I don't expect them to go anywhere. I mean, they're a huge sponsor of Tiger Woods in general. They just started a new deal with the PGA Tour as official card deal earlier this year. They're also a founding partner of TGL, which Tiger Woods founded. So I wouldn't expect the Genesis Invitational to have any problems going forward. Same with Workday, and then obviously MasterCard has been funding the API for a long time. And if something did happen to one of those companies and they didn't have the funds to work with those tournaments anymore, you know, having those, you know, Tiger and Jack hosting those, and then obviously Arnold Palmer, who used to do that for so many years, I think brands would be lining up to associate themselves with those big 3 tournaments, which kind of really elevate themselves above the rest. And then, you know, you mentioned AT&T. They actually re-signed an extension through, I believe, 2030 earlier this year that was announced in June. The Travelers has a long-term deal also through 2030, and obviously things can change because they may have signed, you know, that original deal not knowing that they were going to be a signature event for this long. But the Travelers annually after the U.S. Open each year that week, it's become a big event, and they do such a good job of making sure that players showed up even before it was a signature event, and now they do so much making sure that the media get out there even the week after the U.S. Open. So those big tournaments, the signature events, I feel good about where their funding is coming on the sponsorship front.
Let's turn our attention to the USGA and the deal that was announced. They're on kind of the back end of their championship schedule, back-to-back weeks, U.S. Women's Amateur, then the USAM that just concluded Sunday, Walker Cup coming up in a couple of weeks, and then some of the more modest events. When I say modest in terms of fields, in terms of size, they're boutique, they're great. They're USGA championships. But the deal that they did to extend with NBC, but also the carve out for Versant, what does that indicate for you? It's the first rights deal for Versant, which includes obviously Golf Channel under that umbrella of what was the spinoff of all these multiple cable networks. What does that indicate to you as far as Versant and their desire and appetite to gobble up some rights?
Yeah, it's a very layered and really complicated deal. I think on the U.S. Open front, what casual golf fans should know is that through 2032 now, the final round, the Saturday round of the U.S. Open is going to remain on NBC, and if you want to stream it, it's going to remain on Peacock. So nothing is going to change for that. In total, this deal is going to be bringing in roughly $95 million annually, which is a great deal for the USGA. That's what it's valued out. CNBC reported, which is actually part of Versant. And what it means for Versant, to your question specifically, is they had to strike this deal as 2 different companies. So previously, when NBC Sports would come in for a deal, they would negotiate it and then say, okay, we're going to put some on NBC, we're going to put some on Peacock, we're going to put some on USA Network, here's our Golf Channel programming. But this time, Versant, which is now the new parent of USA Network and Golf Channel, they had to negotiate their rights alongside NBC negotiating their rights for NBC and Peacock. And what this means for Versant moving forward is they're going to have to partner with whoever it is they want to partner with, unless they're taking an entire package. So whether that's NBC, when the RNA renewal comes up, that deal for the Open Championship and others, it expires in 2028. And what this flexibility means is Versant, so USA Network and Golf Channel again, they could actually do a deal with a different network beyond NBC. Say NBC isn't interested in renewing that RNA deal or a different golf package, or this goes outside golf too for other sports. You could see Versant partnering with ESPN or Amazon and for streaming simulcasts or deals altogether. So it gives Versant some flexibility. I actually had a conversation last week, a very interesting one, with the new Versant Sports president, Matt Hong, and we talked about a lot of these things for a story I wrote, Front Office Sports. And he really touted that flexibility, and it remains to be seen whether that's really a good thing long term, and there are some questions around streaming, but that's kind of the general landscape of the new parent company of Golf Channel and USA Network.
Yeah, it's interesting. And in reporting, I know yesterday about how there is going to be a branding of USA Network as USA Sports, and Golf Channel being obviously a part of that, and Golf Channel will remain, but also they being reported that there is a rebranding as well there, but that's significant news. Let me get your thoughts on Live with the culmination with their first year of having this tiered distribution from a television standpoint. What's your assessment of what they got from Big Fox when they got it, and then FS1 and subsequently the other platforms through that relationship? What's your overall assessment of year one with that?
Yeah, so as we look back, Liv's individual season is over. Now we saw John Rahm won that individual title, and they have one more event, the team championship, running this week alongside the tour championship down at Eastlake. But basically, the numbers have not been anything to, the TV ratings, I should say, have not been anything to, write huge press releases about or huge articles. They're okay. I mean, when they're on cable channels, FS1 and FS2, they're not great. They're below 100,000. When they're on Big Fox, they get a couple 100,000, still vastly below what the PGA Tour gets. But I think if you talk to people at Live, they weren't expecting to take down the PGA Tour when they go head to head, or even just when they're on Big Fox. They created this deal just a few weeks really before this Live Golf season started, the 2025 season started. So they knew they weren't getting a ton of premium spots on Big Fox. There was even one round of a Live tournament this year on Fox Business Network. So they knew that it was going to take some time. It's just when you look at the ins and outs of TV programming, they're planning stuff for spring, fall 2026 already. So the Live folks, I know when I've talked to them, they're more confident that they're going to get some better slots and better time frames next year on Fox. And we'll see if that translates to better TV ratings. They are rolling out their schedule a little bit earlier this year than they did last year. But it remains to be seen whether Live really gains that traction in the U.S. and on U.S. TV. Scott O'Neill, the new CEO of Live, will tell you he really has more of a global preference for Live, or that's kind of where his focus is. So that's my assessment of the year one TV ratings. And remember, this was not a big money deal. If anything, this was a ad revenue sharing deal between Fox and Live. I don't think Fox was paying a huge sum at all. So going into year two, it is a multi-year deal. Live will be on Fox again next year.
Dave, I appreciate it. I look forward to doing this again. Dave Rumsey, Front Office Sports, on the business of what is happening in the industry. We take a break now. Dave, thank you again. We come back, some final thoughts on a great award being bestowed tonight to a dear friend of the man whose name is on that award, and also one of the great championships in golf starts today. I'll explain back right after this. Back in, a couple minutes left here on this Tuesday here on 5 Clubs Golf Channel, also PGA Tour Radio on Sirius XM Channel 92. This segment brought to you by Golf Pride. I was fiddling around yesterday. I don't know if I'll ever replace my gamer putter, but I had a new reverse tapered putter grip on this putter yesterday in the home office. It's the best putter grip, and my buddies may mock me when I say I've never made more putts. But they see them. All right, I want to mention a great championship that starts today at Meadowbrook, Jericho, Long Island, the Met Open. Johnson Wagner, our buddy, our colleague here at 5 Clubs, won it twice. So did my old boss at Seminole, Jerry Pittman. He won it twice. So did the likes of guys like Snead and Nelson and Sarazen and Craig Wood and Henry Picard. It's one of the great championships in golf at a time when professional golf was in its infancy. This was as good a win, for all intents and purposes, for a long time as you could have. And Byron Nelson said him winning that event was really what lit his fire and belief that he could do it at the absolute highest level when he did it in 1936. So I hope all the competitors there at Meadowbrook out there on Long Island have a great 3 days. Starts today, a 54-hole competition. You put your name on that trophy and you start looking at that trophy, that's pretty special. And also a reminder, tonight on Golf Channel, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, a special, the Payne Stewart Award, which is representative of somebody who has gone way too soon, obviously in the fall of 1999. And tonight is very personal because Paul Azinger, who had a bona fide kinship with Payne Stewart, I remember one of their great moments, and it was Paul getting the better of Payne at Muirfield Village, that spicy little greenside bunker shot that he zipped into the hole to win that event. And Payne was ensconced in Cleveland Browns attire head to toe, which was one of the great sponsorship deals of all time, because there he was, whatever market he was in, wearing the colors of the NFL franchise. But tonight I know it's going to be sentimental, it's going to be poignant, it's going to be emotional for Paul, for his family, for the Stewart family. And when you look out at that crowd, you'll see past recipients, and Dan Hicks will be hosting that. It's a neat event. It's a neat night there at Eastlake. Tonight, 7 p.m. right here on Golf Channel. And the man who will be hosting it, the aforementioned Dan Hicks, will join me tomorrow on this program to talk about that. And we look ahead to the Tour Championship. For all of us here on 5 Clubs, have a great Tuesday. See you tomorrow.